Excellent. So welcome to July. Not sure where the first half of the year went, but I'm finding it really interesting because Unity Worldwide Ministries came up with this perfect vision for 2020 I think I had it in my inbox last November. So looking at all of these ideas that they came up with for us for the year has been really interesting in light of our circumstances and what it means for us. And I'm also finding it really interesting how the daily word fits in with this. And you might be saying, how can comfort and play fit in together? And I'm going to show you in a couple slides. So what I'm intending to do today is kind of give you an overview of play in a spiritual sense. So this is our graphic for the month. You've seen it already once. But what I'm finding interesting is the idea of in the zone, understanding that this is about our own spiritual journey. It's a journey we're taking together, but yet at the same time, it's a journey that we take alone. And one of the things that I'm really becoming aware of, because I went through my extensive collection of Unity writers, both the Fillmores and Katie and others, and nobody wrote about playing. And I even did a word search in a couple of the books, and there's nothing. There is no metaphysical meaning for the word play. In fact, the word play does not appear in any of the material, other than in the context of David playing his harp or someone playing an instrument. So there's not this idea of taking time to draw back from work and going into play mode. And I got thinking about this, and I realized, really in my studies of the Fillmores, our co-founders, I didn't really see much of them having hobbies or taking time away. Everything was very spiritually based. And not to criticize or condemn them, but I just kind of went, what's different? What's different from that period of time? And what I realized, having just finished teaching a class on the New Testament, or the Christian scriptures, as we also call them, is that the Apostle Paul more greatly influenced what Christianity looks like than Jesus did. And I'm sure some of you, I've turned off my camera so I can't see you, but are going, what? Paul influenced? But yes, because most people would recognize this piece of scripture and probably be able to quote it and probably agree with it. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. And certainly in our culture, particularly at the time of the Fillmores, that was very much an attitude that, you got to a certain age and you were expected to go out and work and earn your keep, and perhaps the keep for your family as well, regardless of your age. This idea of being a child in function until your 20s was unheard of. You got to be 12, 13, you were sent off to the factory or the fields or wherever. And this really has influenced our culture in North America and to a certain extent in Europe. The idea that when we get to a certain age, we stop being a child and we let go of that and we become an adult. And I think for myself, that really has caused a lot of problems and probably a lot of mental health issues as well. So let's compare Paul to Jesus. So Jesus called a child whom he put among them and said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And the context of this is the disciples were actually arguing amongst themselves who was the greatest, which is kind of like a sibling, childish kind of thing in my books, but be that as it may. And Jesus was reminding them that it was the child that had the greatest wisdom out of the bunch. The child was the one that was able to be open and receptive, because as we know, children don't have a lot of filters. I discovered that as my godson grew up. He's now 21 and he knows everything and it's perfect. So, but as a child, there were some things that came out of his mouth that his mom and dad and I would just kind of look at each other and go, what? is that all about? So it's the idea of becoming childlike. And I know for some folks, the thought of going back to their childhood is absolutely terrifying. There are aspects of my own childhood I would not go back to for all the money in the world. But if we can take it as an idea of letting go of current filters, of letting go of whatever it is we have learned that we have to do, or we have to be, or how we have to behave, within reason. There are some things, especially right now, that are very appropriate to deal with in an adult way. Social distancing, wearing masks, being mindful of washing our hands, things like that. But at the same time, we can approach these with childlike wonder, with childlike enthusiasm. I'm changing the song I use to wash my hands, just as often as I can, just so it doesn't get boring and I don't lose sight of why it's important. So there's a doctor who wrote a book about play. And as you can see, if you've got a smaller screen, I'll read you the subtitle: How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul. Now, I only found this book as I was preparing this talk, so I haven't read it yet, but that last line really intrigues me, that a medical doctor is suggesting that play is not only necessary as children, but that it continues to be part of our spiritual path. And the quote I found out of the book that really speaks to where I want to go with this: those who play rarely become brittle in the face of stress or lose the healing capacity for humor. And I got thinking about it. I got thinking about our co-founders and the lives they led as children. And perhaps that's why they didn't play as adults, because they didn't know how to. It wasn't part of their upbringing. It was very, in Charles's case, it was very hand to mouth. In Myrtle's case, it was very dictated and very structured. So we don't have this idea of spiritual play in our community. I'm noticing some folks are bringing that in, and I'm glad to see it, but I think perhaps that's one of the transformations we can make in our lives and in our ministries going forward, of introducing play. So what do I mean by play? Well, one of the things I mean is stopping work. Banksy says, if you get tired, learn to rest, not to quit. It's very easy to quit, but the idea of resting, the idea of taking a break from whatever it is we're doing, is becoming very important right now, and it will continue to be important as we move into what will likely not look like what we've been used to for the last couple hundred years. So what can we do about play? How can we bring this into our lives? Why is this important? Well, this one really sprang to me was the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. And I got thinking about that, and some of you know that I had been working in the courthouse for about a dozen years. And when I quit my job, people started saying to me, you look like you've had a facelift. What's different for you? What's different is that the toxicity of that job and of the work I was doing was removed from my life. And what I was able to bring into my life was things that brought me joy. As a child, there was a great book that I read, and it was a collection of stories. And one of the stories was about a toy maker. And the toy maker's motto was, never worked and never will. And the adults didn't get it. The adults didn't get it because they saw that he worked from dawn till dusk, and he didn't take much breaks, and he never took vacation. And they said, of course he's working. How can he say that he's never will? But the children understood that what he was doing, he had so much love for, that for him it wasn't work. It was actually a form of play. And for me, that's really a statement as I move into, what job will I have next? Where's my career going now that I've had some life changes and that the world around us has changed? The idea that if I'm not playing, I might slip into a depression kind of resonates for me. That's something I don't particularly want to go to. By the same token, I don't want my work to be overwhelming that also could lead into a depression or into a toxic situation. So how can we move into this? What can we do? Well, one of the few authors that has anything to say about this from the 19th century is, of course, Ralph Waldo Emerson. who says it's a happy talent to know how to play. The idea that at his time you had to know that it was a knowledge base, that it was something that you learned as an adult, how to play. May we all be reminded of how to play without great effort. Carl Jung, I'm trusting everyone's heard of him, says the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct. The idea that this is something very deep within us, something that, resonates at a great level, and that, connects then, therefore, to all of our levels, to those subconscious ideas, those unconscious ideas, as well as our conscious mind. And Diane Ackerman, who I'm now learning is a poet and author, says play is our brain's favorite way of learning. Well, of course, if we're playing properly, if we're playing in alignment, then we're having fun. Then we're in a place of joy rather than having things being smashed into our brains with a 2x4 or a 6-pound mallet, or however you were taught as a child. The idea that as we do something that it becomes joyful is something kind of a novelty. And that was something I learned early on, was that the idea that when I first came into Unity and I was taught about denials and affirmations, I was really intellectual about it. I was sure that I had to get it perfectly right. And somebody pointed out to me that my attempt to be perfect at it, my attempt to get all the words right, were actually interfering with my ability to bring the feeling below it and to embrace it fully. That I really wasn't doing the affirmation, that it wasn't part of me. I wasn't being the affirmation. I was speaking affirmations, but they weren't working effectively. And I went to a mentor and said, what's going on? And she said, you're not having fun. I'm like, it's spiritual. You're not supposed to have fun doing spiritual stuff. And she gave me this look that said, you might choose to change your mind about that. And what I found is that as I have added play into my spiritual practice, as I have added a light touch into my spiritual practice, a few of you have had classes with me. I think even in the most serious of classes, we have managed to have some fun. I did a class on the book of Revelation, talking about how we're seeing things that are in the book of Revelation in the media right now because of theology of other denominations. Blessings to them. But we managed to have some fun with that. We managed to have some spiritual play while we were at it. So one of the tools that I'd like to share with you is actually at our home webpage of unity.org. Oops. And they have a whole page of spiritual tools and practices. And all of them, I was realizing, you could take them very seriously. You could be very stern with yourself about practicing, or you could choose to have the light touch and find ways of bringing joy and empathy and comfort and fun, dare I say it, and play into this whole idea. So I've chosen a couple just to give you an example. One of the things that they have, and they have a nice little link, and this is an excerpt out of the article that it takes you to, is about creative work. The idea that play doesn't have to be out in the field playing Red Rover or playing on a jungle gym or swimming laps, but the idea that it is anything that brings you joy. The idea that play is anything that makes your heart sing. So they suggest to take time to draw, cook, dance, write, sew, design, build, sing, and express your creativity in any way that emerges. Cultivate the freedom of pure creation. Embrace the process and let go of any attachment to a result. The joy of being fully present to that process is a powerful way to connect with the divinity you are. And I would add to that, I saw a meme the other day and I went back to try and find it, couldn't find it, but it suggested that, in this time where perhaps we're not working as many hours as we normally would, and for some we're not working at all, that, the idea that, well, you've got this opportunity, learn a language, create a new business for yourself, start painting and sell your paintings. The idea that we monetize everything I think, inhibits people in playing. The idea that I can only paint if I can make money off it has really inhibited a number of people. The idea that I can do anything if it's for money has inhibited people. Or certainly I would question how much creativity is coming out if the end goal is bottom line. And the person who posted this suggested, no, do these creative things because it's who you are. It's who you have come here to be, who you need to express to the world, because the world has plenty of a lot of things. What the world needs is people who are passionate about things, people who are bringing joy into the world, people who can look at a situation, acknowledge the seriousness of it, and yet find something to laugh about, to smile about, or to just take within and say, you know what, this needs some loving and I'm going to love it. A similar idea for play is self-care. So what is it? We talk about this a lot, and I've heard a lot of people, I'm not watching much TV, but it seemed like that was something that was coming up a lot. So self-care is being willing and committed to rejuvenate your soul and find your center, the place of unshakable peace and stability where you can weather the storms of life. Being intentional in our self-care practice is the greatest act of love we can give to ourselves. The idea that we can use self-care as a form of play, or play as a form of self-care, that certainly isn't what I'm hearing in the media right now. I'm hearing very much, oh, you need to take care of your food intake and don't eat junk food and make sure you get that 30 minutes of exercise. Well, what if I want to just have some fun? What if I can have fun instead of doing laps around my neighborhood? What if I could have fun perhaps kicking a soccer ball at the field across the street from me? Something that would look absolutely ridiculous to everyone else. They might even think that I've lost my marbles. But if it's something that brings me fun, it's something that brings me joy and has the added benefit that I'm getting my exercise, I'm outdoors, whatever, well, why wouldn't I choose something that's more playful, that's more engaged with myself as part of my self-care? You know, who says that your morning breakfast has to look a certain way? I'm really keen right now on making waffles and seeing what I can pile on top that tastes good and looks kind of creative. It's all about that recognition that we are worthy to play. And that's not a message I think we get from society. Play is something you do after work. Play is something you do when you've earned the privilege of taking vacation. And I'm here to say, no, at this point, it's too important. Circumstances are such right now that play is probably the most important thing we need to do, especially when we align it and make it part of our spiritual practice. Letting your mind play is the best way to solve problems. I've always loved Calvin and Hobbes, and I've been turning to my books of the collections of the cartoons of late. The idea that as we play, we're working with another part of our brain on a physical level. The idea that we can allow our brain to do something totally unrestricted. And perhaps, and I invite you to try this as a test, try a different form of meditation or prayer practice. Try something that's a little lighter, something that's perhaps fun, perhaps even, dare I say it, blasphemous to somebody else. I remember seeing something about, needing to yell at God about the circumstances, and that if you can't yell at God and express your frustrations and anger with God, then why on earth would you be taking the good stuff? That idea that it's wholeness, and that out of that wholeness comes new ideas as you release things that no longer serve, that you can have that space for creativity, that space for a solution to a problem. Our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, used to, if someone came to him with a problem, he would close his eyes, go in the silence for a little while. People were kind of used to it, that was part of his process, and he would come out with an answer. when I had an opportunity to interview his granddaughter, she said, I thought all grandfathers went into the silence like that. It wasn't until I was about 8 that I discovered that the kids thought he was really weird. So we have this opportunity to embrace something other than what we've been deemed to have as a societal norm. So we have an environmentalist who notes that everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul. And then Thomas Aquinas, I mean, he was a theologian. There's a lot of Thomas Aquinas I do not agree with, but I will agree with this one. It is requisite for the relaxation of the mind that we make use from time to time of playful deeds and jokes. Not sure what kind of jokes he would be telling, but the fact that he acknowledged the need for that time in our lives, that it couldn't all be, you know, praying and meditating and doing spiritual things, but that at some level we needed to have that playtime, that opportunity to be someone else and yet ourselves. Also at the website, there's a 1-minute 4-step self-care practice. Pause, notice, breathe, be grateful. Some of you may recognize the labyrinth at Unity Village. When I'm there, that's one of the few times I will actually get up early, will be to go and walk the labyrinth as the sun is rising. Some parts of the year are easier than others. We'll just leave it at that. But the idea that we take a conscious time to play, to let go of the expectations and to find that space that brings us joy. George Santayana, to the art of working well, a civilized race would add the art of playing well. Not sure that we've succeeded in that, but this is our opportunity to add to that. And following up on the story I shared earlier, you've achieved success in your field when you don't know whether what you're doing is work or play. And I think that's something for all of us to think about as we move through this time, as we move through uncertainty, and, you know, not just uncertainty in the short term, but we have some pretty long-term uncertainty as well. And certainly it can be difficult when we're being bombarded with information and some seemingly contradictory information. So that's, for me, becoming part of my time of spiritual work, is also adding in that break for my spiritual work includes playtime, whether it's specifically part of my spiritual practice or that I will do my spiritual work and then I will go and play for half an hour before I resume whatever task is on my desk for the day. This is your homework. I don't usually give homeworks on Sundays, but I'm going to invite you to try this. So make a list of things that make you happy. And I know the wording of make you happy, we could get into a whole other Sunday talk about that. But just, this is what the author wrote. Make a list of things you do every day. Compare the lists and adjust accordingly. I got to tell you, in the space that I'm in right now, I have allowed my body to set its diurnal rhythm. And I'm kind of liking it because I'm finding I'm sleeping deeper. I'm waking up without an alarm. I'm starting off, instead of being startled to the ceiling, that I'm starting in a calmer manner. And because of that calm, I'm able to do my spiritual work, my playful work. I invite you to take a consideration of that. You might find some things that are surprising. And finally, no matter how big and bad you are, when a 2-year-old hands you a toy phone, you answer it. And I invite all of us to remember that the invitation to play is a sacred one. The invitation to play from a child usually means they trust you implicitly. An invitation to play from an adult, in my experience at least, has meant that they are willing to be seen as carefree and silly and possibly not what you expected. in that moment. Well, blessings. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen for a second because I realize I have music coming up and I didn't share properly. So let me just redo that. And now, hopefully, sing our song for into meditation.
The songs through me. I am God's rhythm and harmony. God sings the songs through me. A song of life, of radiant life, of life so full and free. I am God's melody of life. God sings the songs through me. God sings the songs through me.
Now, as we turn to our time of spiritual practice, whether you call it meditation, prayer, prayer and meditation, meditation and prayer, it's a time to come together as a community, to set aside some time for ourselves individually. And as always, I invite you to do three things. To allow yourself to be comfortable in whatever you're sitting on or in, knowing that within the structure is divine wisdom to support you. To take a few deep breaths and come to that space in your body where you feel most connected, where you feel a oneness, where you feel your divinity, where you feel connected. And finally, to allow, as we move forward, my words to be your words, my voice to be your voice. Coming into this space, we do so with open hearts, open minds, with the awareness that things aren't as they have been, the acknowledgement that it might feel wobbly right now, but also the acknowledgement that within us is the faith, the strength, the wisdom to persevere, the love to expand beyond our own selves, the awareness that even in times when we must socially distant and seemingly apart farther than 6 feet or 2 meters, that in this moment, in this oneness, our hearts are joined, and that we can feel that energy flowing from us and into us. To acknowledge the sadness and the anger, the frustrations we might feel right now. To acknowledge that it is part of the human experience. Our goal is to experience it with a mindfulness of our divinity. To acknowledge that this is not ourselves at the depth of ourselves, but an experience we're having, a learning opportunity we're having, an opportunity to grow, to share, to experience. An opportunity to get creative, to share our talents, whether it's in music or the arts or words or sewing or organizing, whatever creative gift we have, we open ourselves to sharing that, to having the wisdom of a child to recognize that right now we need to play, that right now part of our self-care needs to be not only attending to our spiritual practices, for they will ground us, they will strengthen us, but in that grounding and strength to share our playfulness. And I invite you in the next few moments of silence to just allow any thoughts around that to just flow through you. Any questions you might have about what that could look like in the silence. And for this awareness of our divine self, of our ability to share on the human plane, on our ability to walk this path with other travelers. And for the opportunity to be playful, to give ourselves permission to let go of societal norms that say spirituality must look a certain way, but rather to express the true self that we are as individuals. And as we come to a close, we bring to mind all the names in the prayer box, all the names in our hearts, all those who are experiencing challenges right now. We enfold them in light and love, knowing that their divinity is equally expressing. And for this time together and this opportunity to be in the oneness, we are so grateful. And so it is. Amen.
God sings the songs through
Thank you, Wendy. What just a magnificent lesson. I love that you come to play with us and let us play. I wrote down a whole bunch of notes because I thought, oh, I want to remember all these things, but I feel like I'll definitely going back and looking through the slides and your talk, just because it was so deep. And the idea that in this pandemic, we think about, you know, going back to being normal, and there's no normal anymore. We're going to go to a new normal, and hopefully play will be part of that new normal. And you brought that to the forefront in our life. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We love having you here. We hope you'll come back again very soon. And we're going to play and send you some nice applause from Unity Kitchener.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.